All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. 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 We're back here today on Thursday, November the 20th, 2025, to continue to document the madness and try to get at some of the most important questions that definitely need some answers. Sorry, I'm just distracted here because I'm just making sure everything's ready to rock and roll. I hope you're well wherever you are right now watching this. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm glad you guys are here. Okay, we're rocking and rolling. You can watch this show right now on X, Rumble, Twitch. I've even got it on YouTube. We'll see how long it stays there. Did I miss anybody? There's a bunch of others that we're on. But anyways, welcome all. The title is pretty self-explanatory. The Freeland-Rhodes New World Order. We're talking about the fact that we were just alerted today that Canadian politician, former deputy prime minister under Justin Trudeau, Chrystia Freeland, has gotten promoted. Not investigated, promoted out of the world of politics, and is now directly involved with the Rhodes Trust. I don't know. I just find these things very interesting. We learned a lot about our Prime Minister, Mark Carnevale-Carney, and his connections to the establishment, the Committee of 300, the WEF, the Chatham House, et cetera, understanding where these people come from. We all know the WEF connections. We know those connections with people like Freeland. We've had many questions about her for a long time. And this is a significant thing. And what I like to study is the movement happening behind the political veil that everybody gets lost in. Okay. A lot of people are just going to comment on what's happened here and just go, oh, yeah, I guess she gets promoted. It's the way of it. It's the way of the world. Some people are like, good for her. We now have a woman in the Rhodes Trust. And she's the, I guess, president of the Rhodes Trust. I'm actually going to go to the actual Rhodes website and we'll get all the information directly from the horse's mouth. Yeah, what do they say? Oh, she's the next warden and CEO. She's the warden and CEO. Okay, so we'll go to that in a second. But I've been doing a series of shows on these international bankers and the round tables, les cercles, that little circle rainbow pin they all wear. Yeah, there's an origin to that. I've done that in the past. I won't dwell on that one too much in this show. But I've been doing this series covering the occult roots of all the isms, the totalitarianisms, the communisms, the fascisms, the crony capitalisms, the socialisms, the occult roots, the hidden roots. And this is really interesting timing that I've just done that series. I was just inspired to do it. I went into my notes, put all of the research into it, and gave you guys some presentations. I hope you go back and check them out. Occult Roots of Totalitarianism. There's 2 parts to it. The total runtime is 7 hours for both parts. So strap yourself in for that level of that amount of information that I'm going to throw at you in those shows. This one's just a continuation, and it's just happened today that I noticed it. And I went, oh, interesting. What a good time to bring up the Rhodes Trust and the history of Cecil Rhodes, the Milner Group, the Round Table, and all these different things we've been talking about. Because if we understand the history of these organizations, we see that they're still active in the world. And we see that the power players that should be under investigation for causing ruinous destruction to their countries before they skip off into wonderland of working in the UN or working in some Rhodes Trust somewhere or in one of the sanctuaries provided to the agents of the high table by the high table to then work for the high table in a different capacity. Those are worth documenting and paying attention to so that you can understand how this game really works. This game does not work on the public level at all. What you see on the public level, there's so many things that have happened in the background. There's so much history and context that needs to be known about what's producing those situations in our world and in our country right now, in Canada or wherever you're watching, because this is an international move by the power players, what I just call the high table, to consolidate power. I hope that's not surprising. That's as old as history. It's just that the tactics of this kind of warfare and whatnot are just different than they may have been in the past. Although many things are actually just very predictable because once you've studied the playbook, once you've listened to the actual statements that have been given publicly, or at least maybe given in front of some small group and then eventually found out by various journalists and researchers that got the transcripts and then put it out publicly, then you can get a better handle on how this corrupt racket goes, how your country got captured, who did it. How do you, we got to follow the money. You got to find the receipts. You got to follow the footprints of the predator until you find the nest of the predator or the cave of the predator. Well, thank goodness for people like the names I've been mentioning throughout this series. I always say this isn't me. I'm just sitting here collecting the notes and giving you the other side, right? There's a whole body of journalistic research by very, very intelligent people, very educated people that don't just believe in the coincidence theory of history. Like all your professors and all the big names and the influencers out there and the people who comment on politics and all these things, in my opinion, and in the opinion of these names that I've been listing endlessly, and we'll throw another one at you today, they do not look at history as just coincidental. There's obviously coincidences. We're not saying there isn't. But to what level are the coincidences actually just random and coincidental? And to what level are things rigged and made to happen? Made to happen by powerful financial, political, and even occult forces that make them happen that way. And it almost gets to a level of ritual when you really boil it down, but that might be too much for some people to digest, so we won't go there in this show. Let's just stick close to the facts, right? So today I'm going to be getting into the work of the great G. Edward Griffin. I can't say enough about this man. I've had the honor of meeting him. I've had the honor of interviewing him numerous times. I'm going to try to reach out. He's getting much older now, but the man is still very sharp. And I want to try to reach out to him and see if he'll do an updated presentation for me, for you guys on this, on the Rhodes Trust and this whole great circle occult world. We're going to get into that with him, hopefully, but we'll see if I can get in touch with him. But I've done these interviews with him before. I've read his books. I've watched his documentaries. And he, to me, is one of the best guys to explain this to you because, first of all, I love Ed is just one of the nicest human beings ever. Soft-spoken man, but super intelligent, breaks it down point by point in layman's terms, easy to understand. And the great thing about G. Edward Griffin that I say about all the people that I talk about with you guys is he's not just lying on his own, or he's not just resting and relying on his own opinion. He is sourcing all of the points that he's going to bring up to you. And that's what I've always loved about those types of researchers is they bring the receipts. Okay. Because it's fun to say stuff, but unless you can prove it, or at least prove that it's worthy of investigation, then, there's no point. But not only do these men and women that I've been documenting, who've been documenting this whole conspiracy for some time, and it is a conspiracy, it is an illegal takeover and infiltration of your country. It's collusion between multiple different entities, foreign and domestic, that have colluded and conspired behind the scenes for a long time to take your country and plunder your wealth with your consent, your manufactured consent, the entire way. So I don't want to hear any crap about, oh, here's another conspiracy. No. Most of the conspiracies you're going to hear about are bullshit. This one is true. This one is documented. This one is irrefutable. If you've gone through my shows, forget about all my points and my opinions in these shows. If you stick to the sources and the names and the authors and the books and the facts and what the receipts that I put into the shows from the people that collected it, that's where you got to focus your attention. Okay. And I highly recommend you follow up on the points that G. Edward Griffin is going to bring to you today. We're going to do two versions of this. I have a 6-minute clip from one of his old school documentaries that I want to play where he gets into this as sort of a general overview. That's going to whet the palate. That's going to get us in the right mindset. And then I'm going to read a transcript of an old presentation that he gave specifically on the Rhodes Trust, the Rhodes Scholarship, the round table, the rings within rings, the way that this works, the origins of it, who designed the system, and how it's still at work in our world today. and will lead us back to how this is relevant to the recent appointing of Chrystia Freeland, of all people, to the CEO of the Rhodes Trust. That's pretty epic if you've been following this trend or this track for some time, for those of you out there who have. So there you go. There's my little preamble. Welcome, everybody. I hope you're comfy. Strap yourselves in. Here's the video we're going to start with, and then I've got some comments. And I would also like to monitor your comments. Let me just make sure I got everybody up here. And if you have anything that pops out to you while you're listening to this video, so try to focus for a second. Maybe you're at work or maybe you're doing stuff. Just focus on what he's saying and let me know in the comments if anything rings a bell for you. And then we'll come back. All right, here we go. Take it away, Mr. Ed Griffin.
In 1870, a wealthy British socialist by the name of John Ruskin was appointed as Professor of Fine Arts at Oxford University in London. He taught his students that the state must take control of the means of production and organize them for the good of the community as a whole. But he advocated placing control of the state into the hands of a single dictator. He said, "My continual aim has been to show the eternal superiority of some men to others, sometimes even of one man to all others." Dr. Quigley tells us, Ruskin spoke to the Oxford undergraduates as members of the privileged ruling class. He told them that they were the possessors of a magnificent tradition of education, beauty, rule of law, freedom, decency, and self-discipline, but that this tradition could not be saved unless it could be extended to the lower classes in England itself and to the non-English masses throughout the world. Ruskin's message had a sensational impact. His inaugural lecture was copied out in longhand by one undergraduate, Cecil Rhodes, who kept it with him for 30 years. Cecil Rhodes made one of the world's greatest fortunes. With help from international bankers, he was able to establish a virtual monopoly over all the diamonds that came from South Africa, and most of the gold as well. Throughout his entire life, Cecil Rhodes spent most of his vast income to promote the ruling class ideas of John Ruskin. Many people are familiar with the world-famous Rhodes Scholarships, which were established to promote the less controversial aspects of John Ruskin's dream. But very few are familiar with the fact that in 1891, Cecil Rhodes established a secret society to promote the rest of that dream. Dr. Quigley explains, in this secret society, Rhodes was to be leader. Stead, Brett, Lord Esher, and Milner were to form an executive committee. Arthur Lord Balfour, Sir Harry Johnston, Lord Rothschild, Albert Lord Grey, and others were listed as potential members of a circle of initiates, while there was to be an outer circle known as the Association of Helpers, later organized by Milner as the Round Table Organization. Here then was the classic pattern of political conspiracies throughout all history. At the center, usually depicted as the all-seeing eye, there is a tiny group in complete control, with one man as the undisputed leader. Next comes a circle of secondary leadership that for the most part is completely unaware of an inner core. They are led to believe that they are the innermost ring. In time, as these conspiracies are built from the center out, they form additional rings of organization. Those in the outer echelons usually are poor idealistic souls with an honest desire to improve the world. They never suspect an inner control for sinister purposes, and only those few who demonstrate a ruthless capacity for higher leadership are ever allowed to see it. After the death of Cecil Rhodes, the inner core of his secret society fell to the hands of Lord Alfred Milner, Governor-General and High Commissioner of South Africa. As director of a number of public banks and corporate precursor of England's Midland Bank, he became one of the greatest political and financial powers in the world. Milner recruited into his secret society a group of young men, chiefly from Oxford and Toynbee Hall. And according to Quigley, through his influence, these men were able to win influential posts in government and international finance, and became the dominant influence in British imperial and foreign affairs up to 1939. Under Milner in South Africa, they were known as Milner's Kindergarten until 1910. In 1909 to 1913, they organized semi-secret groups known as Round Table groups in the chief British dependencies and in the United States. The Roundtable Group in the United States promptly created an external organization known as the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations. It is through this organizational ring and then outward, through tax-exempt foundations, universities, and government agencies, that the international capitalist conspiracy has dominated the domestic and foreign policies of the United States for over 50 years. Unless there is any doubt as to who is behind the CFR, Dr. Quigley tells us bluntly, in New York it was known as the Council on Foreign Relations and was a front for J.P. Morgan and Company in association with the very small American Roundtable Group. The CFR building is located on the west side of fashionable Park Avenue in New York. Although it definitely is not the center of the conspiracy, and although practically none of its members are aware of an inner control, nevertheless it is semi-secret in its operation. It shuns publicity, and members are sworn not to disclose to the public the proceedings of its conferences and briefings. It has a formal membership of 1,400 elite personalities. In Harper's Magazine of July 1958, there is an article entitled School for Statesmen, written by CFR member Joseph Kraft. Kraft revealed that one of the chief architects for the CFR was none other than Colonel Edward Mandell House. At the time of writing this article, Mr. Kraft boasted that the CFR membership, even then, included the President, the Secretary of State, the Chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission, the Director of the Central Intelligence Agency, the Board Chairman of 3 of the country's 5 largest industrial corporations, 2 of the 4 richest insurance companies, and 2 of the 3 biggest banks, plus the senior partners of 2 of the 3 leading Wall Street law firms, the publishers of the 2 biggest news magazines and of the country's most influential newspaper, and the presidents of the big 3 in both universities and foundations, as well as a score of other college presidents, a scattering of top scientists and journalists.
All right. Wow. A lot of information in 6 minutes. That is pretty epic. And something stood out to me. There was a bunch of things that stood out to me. Let me know in the comments what stood out to you. And I'll do my best to jump around and see if I get any good comments in there. But my thing was this little title where he was speaking, he was reading a quote about a circle of initiates. A circle of initiates. Well, there's been a circle that has been a very prominent symbol that's been going around for some time now. And it is this symbol right here, the rainbow circle or ring of power, as we've been calling it. And you're going to notice that your favorite politicians who love you ever so much and always put policy forth that is in your best interest, in the interests of your children and your grandchildren, are always wearing this bloody pin. And I can't help but notice that is a circle. It's a coat of many colors. It's the rainbow. It's the melting pot. It's the one ring to rule them all. It is the circle of trust. You know, just thinking about what pops out at me here symbolically. And this is encapsulated basically the agenda that's been going on since the days of Cecil Rhodes, since the days of the Milner Group, since the days of Adam Bloody Weishaupt. The push, right? And then, of course, on the, you can go to actually read what those colors represent. This is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which have nothing to do about sustainable development. They're sustainably developing the New World Order. And they are looking for all of the great talking points. It's a combination, don't forget, of all the isms. It's not pure communism. It's not pure fascism. It's not pure neo-feudalism. It's not pure socialism. It's not pure. It's a hybridized system that was put together behind the scenes before it was brought out into the political public world. And of course, they're saying, well, we want no poverty. Well, if you have less humans, you can have less poverty. Zero hunger, same thing. Good health and well-being. Yeah, don't we all want that? So these are all they sound great, right? But it'll be controlled by the cult of the medics, of course. Quality education. Well, quality education, that's sort of a that's a term that could mean different things to different people. You know what I mean? Because the quality of education that I'm seeing is absolutely a disaster. So what they mean is quality indoctrination. That's what it should say. Gender equality. That's always funny when they talk about that. Clean water sanitization, meaning we're going to control all the water supply in the world. Affordable and clean energy. Yeah, there's your smart cities and all that good stuff. Decent work and economic growth. The economic growth will be decent, under Mondami in New York and under Carney here in Canada and under whoever the hell's running Australia these days, right? Industry innovation and infrastructure, and on and on. Sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production. That's just code for we're going to control every blade of grass and every sand on the seashore from here until the end of time, and we'll regulate every fine detail of your life. Climate action, that is the banner that they chose under the Club of Rome doctrine to launch this assault on the world, and on and on and on we can go. So these are the goals. That's what it symbolizes in the public domain. But what does it symbolize in the occult domain? Well, it all started back with the Rhodes Trust, the Rhodes Roundtable, which was essentially a recruiting program that is very similar to what was built later in the WEF, in the World Economic Forum, with their global, what do they call that? The band of merry men that they have over there at the World Economic Forum that all of your politicians are members of. I can't remember what they call it, but it's some kind of like breeding program for politicians. And when you have the statements from Klaus Schwab saying that they penetrated cabinets all over the Western world with WEF agents, and that he used Trudeau in Canada as his number one example to joke, like laugh about how they did it. If you've all seen that clip, I've played it many times. And then there's also the other admissions we can get into. Well, Chrystia Freeland was deputy prime minister under Trudeau. And Mark Carney, at the time of Trudeau, everybody forgets, Mark Carney was the head of the Bank of Canada, and he was also he's been all over the place. All right, so he was also a part of a lot of the economic policies that the Liberals rolled out during Trudeau that they're now trying to say they're going to totally change it up under Carney, when Carney was intimately involved with the groups that were informing Trudeau about how to run the Canadian economy moving forward, which just so happened to go along with those United Nations goals and the WEF agenda. So Chrystia Freeland was the sort of deputy prime minister, and she was, of course, the one that was cackling and laughing about freezing Canadians' bank accounts when they were protesting getting a pharmaceutical product mandated on them during the lockdowns. And so and then everybody's gone into the history of Chrystia Freeland's great-grandfather, the Nazi connections, the Ukraine connections, the whole thing. It's very interesting. We won't go down those rabbit holes. We got a new one because this is the press release from the Rhodes Trust itself. Let me read it for you so you know why I'm harping on this today with you. You guys can see it. Beautiful. There it is. You can go to rhodeshouse.ox.ac.uk. Okay, I'll drop it in the chats for you later, but just here it is. The announcement: on the 19th November 2025, former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland, appointed as next Warden and CEO of the Rhodes Trust. The trustees of the Rhodes Trust have appointed Chrystia Freeland as the next Warden of Rhodes House. It's a house, and CEO of the Rhodes Trust. Chrystia will start her role on the 1st of July 2026, taking over from Professor Sir Rick Traynor, KBE, who has served as interim warden and CEO since the 1st of January 2025. The Rhodes Trust, here's their PR. The Rhodes Trust is merely an educational charity best known for the Rhodes Scholarship, which offers talented people that we all want to recruit into our program across the globe an opportunity to study at the University of Oxford. An Alberta-born Rhodes Scholar who came to Oxford in 1991, Chrystia Freeland brings to the Trust a remarkable record of achievement as a prominent Canadian politician that very few Canadians like, acclaimed journalist, an award-winning author. That's amazing. She began her career in journalism as a Ukraine-based freelance reporter for the Financial Times, the Washington Post, and The Economist, who are all owned and financed by the same people, going on to serve as deputy editor of the Globe and Mail and United States managing editor of the Financial Times. She worked as managing director of Thomson Reuters, the Rothschilds, before returning to Canada and entering politics in 2013. Since then, Chrystia has served as Canada's Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, which was, I mean, if you want to know why your economy is just plummeting right now, look no further, and Minister of Foreign Affairs, among other positions, and has been recognized for her significant contributions to public life. They're very significant, I must say. With her unique blend of international experience spanning politics, journalism, public policy, like freezing bank accounts, she will be able to bring new insights to the organization. And on we go. Oh, is there a quote? What's the quote? Oh, here's her quote. Mr. Speaker, I just want to say it's an honor and privilege to return to Oxford as Warden of Rhodes House and CEO of Rhodes Trust. Having personally benefited from a Rhodes Scholarship, I know how deeply transformative and influential, Mr. Speaker, it can be on the lives and future of our scholars. The experience helped shape my international outlook. Did they help shape your international outlook? It's quite questionable, and played a defining role in guiding my subsequent career. I look forward to working with the Trust to build on its remarkable legacy and further strengthen the impact of the scholarships on individual scholars, on the global Rhodes community, and on society, Mr. Speaker. So there you go. That's from Chrystia. And I couldn't help but think, wait, the Rhodes Trust. Where have I heard that before? Well, I heard about it from G. Edward Griffin. And then I started looking into it. And then other people started bringing it up. And then I was getting into it. Michael Howard was bringing it up in his books. Jim Mars was bringing this up. Everybody was bringing this up. And I was like, okay, we better look into this Rhodes Scholarship, the recruitment program. And so Ed basically covered the general overview. Now I'm going to do some reading for you. And what this is actually, before I read, I am going to check on the comments if you guys have any good ones for me. But what I want to do is read this. This is a transcript of a presentation that Ed Griffin did early 2000s. So it's an older one. And he breaks this all down. But before I jump in that, I promise, let me see how we doing. We got some people on YouTube. Thanks, everybody's here. Young Global Leaders. Thank you, Numb Canadian. Good name. Young Global Leaders, WEF. That's what it was. The Young Global Leaders. There's a lot of global in their rhetoric. We got Beverly from Florida. We got people from Australia. Dead Star Cave Girl. She, Numb Canadian. She needs to eventually sit in a tribunal for her crimes. Yes. Bill Clinton, also a Rhodes Scholar, blah. Yeah, and his name's coming up right now with the Epstein thing that's not going the way that everybody was telling me it was going to go. So just eat your popcorn on that one. Stay tuned for more. Oh, we got listening from Scotland. Scotland! I love Scotland. I got to go visit Scotland. I also appreciate your work. Thank you. I appreciate you being here, Susan, from Scotland. I definitely want to come down to Scotland one of these days. I got to see Scotland from a friend of mine's backyard in Ireland. We were in Ireland. We were going around, and he's like, on a clear day, you can see Scotland right across the water there. And I'm like, oh, wow. And I looked over, and sure enough, it was the one clear day in Ireland, and I got to see Scotland from a distance. That's the closest I've been. I have to touch down on there, though, and go and check it out and say hello to my fellow friends in Scotland. Bandika 2577 is saying these university trusts can manage lots of money. This is the Rhodesia Zimbabwe guy. Yeah, the university trusts. These trusts we're going to find out, are one of the biggest scams ever by this high table group that we're going to talk about. Let me double check on Rumble here. SGT Justice says Freeland is toast. It's called treason. Wonder why Justin Castro couldn't use military against the truckers in the Emergency Act. First, you need to be in control. Why did the military refuse? Oh, interesting. Nothing can stop what is coming. Nana Peggy says she is a real WEF piece of work. Yes, exactly. Okay. I better check with my friends on X. I want to make sure I don't miss anybody. I'm horrible at that. I don't want to be that guy. You guys always give me some good stuff in here. No comments on X thus far. Maybe later. Okay, very good. Well, let's do it then. Let's get into this. Oh, and Susan says, come to Scotland. We will expect you. Righto, righto. We'll make it happen. Okay, let's do the reading. I didn't do slides, so it's just going to be some reading with some commentary. All right. So this is from Ed's presentation. So it's actually going to sound more not like a written thing, more like a speech, okay? Because that's how he did it. And it's very long. I'm just going to go through some sections, get some very important points out there, and then we'll try to make it fun. So he says this. For the purpose of this presentation here, I'd like to summarize what you will find. Now, these will be my words. This is the best effort to summarize what Quigley, he's talking about Professor Carroll Quigley, who we covered in my past show. You need to check out Tragedy and Hope for anybody that's new to this. So he's referring to Quigley, and Quigley, just for anybody new, was an insider who wrote an entire book on exactly this roundtable and exactly what the agenda was that we are seeing unfold before our eyes right now today. So if you want to get the playbook, get that book, Tragedy and Hope. It's basically, you could use it for weightlifting as well, like a medicine ball. It's like probably like 12 pounds. That book is so big. Okay. But anyways, you should have it. So he goes, we're summarizing what Quigley was talking about and some others, by the way, a few other people as well. So he's speaking about other insiders that have blown the whistle. And then having done that, I will come back and give you some extensive quotations to show that my summary is accurate. See, because he's a guy that brings receipts. Otherwise, you may wonder that I'm perhaps exaggerating or leaving out some details. Well, here's my summary. Here it is. At the end of the 19th century, a secret society was formed by none other than Cecil Rhodes. Cecil Rhodes, as you all know, I'm sure, was one of the wealthiest men in the world. He was the political head man in South Africa, the chancellor, I believe they called him. And while he was there, he was able to acquire control over all of the diamond deposits and the gold deposits of South Africa, all of the mineral reserves. And in that period of time, he amassed one of the greatest, if not the greatest fortune in the world. What people don't realize is that when he died, none of that money went to his heirs. So where did it go? Well, here the journey really begins. It went through a series of 7 wills to create a secret society. So 7 wills directed to create a secret society. Guys, it sounds like a spy novel. It sounds like fiction until you actually look into it. This is not an exaggeration. The purpose of the Rhodes Scholarship was to provide a funnel or recruiting mechanism to find the most appropriate, the most likely individuals, young men and women who would be recruited into this secret society. It should come as no surprise that William Clinton, Epstein Files, was a Rhodes Scholar. It fits perfectly into this scenario. He says, this is an older presentation, so good old Bill was probably in the news with Monica Lewinsky at the time. This secret organization is not just of historical interest. It exists today, and according to Quigley and other observers who are close to it, it is the most important single historical force in the world since World War I. Now just think about that for a moment. Is it true? Well, we'll cover a few facts and you judge it for yourself, he says. The goal of the secret organization originally was to expand the British Empire and the men who were behind it, not necessarily the royalty, but the real political figures behind it, and I'll mention some of their names in a moment, to extend the British Empire to control the world. I found this statement really interesting, okay, because you can't look at the entire history of the British Empire as something that was just evil. That is what the Marxist leftist would want you to believe, that it was purely evil. It's all just white colonial powers raping and pillaging the world. And it started out as an actual objective to civilize the world and help the world and provide the means of production and commerce and education and health, basic nutrition, all these different things to the third world who had none of those things. And then remember how in a few of my presentations, I've been referencing this quote from J.R.R. Tolkien, where he's talking about the nature of good and evil and how evil of its own cannot create. It can only steal, warp, and manipulate the works of good men. Okay. If you remember that rule, and what I did was apply that rule as like a golden rule to my research. And lo and behold, it actually helped make more sense of things. It gives you a little more nuance here. It means you don't have to be a crazy conspiracy theorist that just believes everybody's evil. You don't have to be a black-pilled person. You can realize that just as in yourself and just as in every walking human being, there's the potential for both good and evil. And there's going to be some evil, there's going to be some good. It's a mix of sun and cloud, right? Well, if we look at the history of the British Empire brought incredible things to the world, but then it was captured by the bad guys, who then used it to continue a different agenda than the original. So just make sure, I have to make this distinction, because if you were getting this from a more lefty, Marxist-inspired, whatever type of conspiracy theorist, I won't name any names, out there, they would stop at British Empire evil. British is evil, right? Which the Islamists and the socialists of the world would be clapping and cheering for that. I'm not going to do that, right? My grandfather comes from Liverpool, England. I come from that part of the world. I understand the many beautiful positive things that British culture and society has brought in terms of freedom, the Magna Carta, etc. The fact that there was nothing but charity in the beginning, and then the evils that are documented and blown up into big cartoon characters for everybody to throw darts at come afterwards, because evil cannot create of its own. It can only steal and warp the work of good men. So what happened is there was a change in the guard, a change in the directive, because these guys, these Illuminists, infiltrated and started to bring out their plan for the ring of power of the world and to use the British Empire as the vehicle to achieve it. It's the same story with America. All the crap that these leftists and wokies and people that hate America like to throw sand at America, even though they're never going to leave, like all these Hollywood celebrities, like, hey, America's so evil and racist, and I just can't stand it, and Trump, and but they never leave. It's kind of interesting. They're throwing the darts at the same straw man that America was set up originally to be a force of good in the world, but then was captured by what we call the deep state. And then the military was used to go and start the wars in the Middle East and carry on the agenda of this roundtable. Okay. So it's always important to separate from the original purpose, the original goals of a nation or a civilization, and then what happened when that got captured by very evil people. Okay. So just want to make sure I point that out here. So that stood out to me. So that's why he says this. Where was it? So the British had acquired the highest. Oh, okay. Yeah. So the goal of the secret organization originally was to expand the British Empire, and the men who were behind it, not necessarily the royalty, but the real political figures, so the real agents behind it, and to extend the British Empire to control the world. Rhodes and his associates believed that the British had acquired the highest culture, the highest level of morality, according to at least his definitions of morality, and the highest standard of living, the most perfect language, etc., which could be used, right, as a weapon. He felt that the race was superior, and that for the benefit of the rest of the world, for their good, it was their responsibility, this group, meaning using the British Empire, using it. It was their responsibility to rule the world for the benefit of the world, of course. That was very carefully spelled out in their writings and their goals. Continuing on. Now, this evolved not too long after the organization was put into motion, where it changed. The goal changed. See, he's saying what I'm saying. World domination didn't change. Control from behind the scenes by a very small elect group didn't change. But what did change is the focal point for this was no longer for British or England. See, that's where it was no longer about benefiting England or Britain or Western civilization. It was about something different. It was to be about the New World Order. international in scope and to be housed through an international organization of some kind in Britain. Initially, they had hoped that it would be the League of Nations, and all of their members worked very hard to create the League of Nations for that very purpose. When that failed, then they set their sights on the United Nations, which was finally put into action and now is on a fast track to becoming the very structure which they had projected as their goal. And now, of course, the center of all this, instead of being in England, is focused now primarily in New York. Mondami's New York. Now, the method by which this secret organization was to accomplish this incredible goal was not to be visible and not to go forth and influence the people directly. The people weren't even supposed to suspect that such a thing was going on, which is why none of us know about it. And if you talk to people, they'll be like, "Nah, you're just crazy." Yeah, but you're a victim of mind control. I'm sorry to say. The people were not even supposed to know the names primarily of the big players. They weren't to be in the news at all. The way this was to be done was indirectly through the power centers of society, as they're called, the seats of influence. The way this was, the strategists behind this are brilliant, and they realize that human beings have a herd instinct. We clump together, most of us. A few hermits get off in the wilderness and do okay, but most of us get nervous out in the wilderness, and we congregate into villages and cities. And beyond that, we come together in organizations like this. We have leaders, we join labor unions, we affiliate with political parties, we come together in church organizations, and we send our kids to schools that are organized, and we have Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, etc. The way we operate is that we work through groups and organizations, and we follow leaders. They had this all figured out, he said. They got your psychological manual playbook on their desk when they create these things. They said, therefore, the way for us to lead the masses is not directly one-on-one, but what we must do is control the leadership of the organizations to which people belong. This is why, guys, this is why it's infiltration instead of invasion. Infiltration instead of invasion, very important. And he said, if we infiltrate and control the leadership of the organizations to which people belong, we don't need that many people to do that task. We just need a couple Chrystia Freelands up in there, you know? So with just 1% or 1/10 of 1% of the population, we can control the entire population by controlling the power centers of society. That was their strategy from the beginning, and it is their strategy today. And I might add, he says, it is an extremely effective strategy. Wow. Wow. He continues, the structure of this secret organization was outwardly modeled after, wait for it, the Jesuit order. Yes, incredible, isn't it? But Rhodes was an admirer of the organizational genius in his mind of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuit order, and he said that we should use that as our model. He didn't take it straight across, but he took many elements from it, and at the deeper level, though, it is interesting, I think, and very instructive to note that he borrowed the structure of classic conspiracy control directly from Adam Weishaupt. And you guys should all know who Adam Weishaupt is. Now, those of you who have studied this thing, you recognize that name. Adam Weishaupt was the founder of the Illuminati. And we all know a little bit about the Illuminati because it was actually disbanded in Bavaria shortly after it was formed. And their secret records and notebooks and so forth were seized and placed into the public records so that you can go to a library today and read verbatim the organizational structure of the original Illuminati. So for those of you that have friends of yours and family that, you bring up Illuminati and they're like, oh, that's a good one. You're watching too much X-Files. All you got to do is pull up the actual information that was gathered by the Bavarian government in that they actually tried the Illuminati and they got all the transcripts. So that whole poo-pooing of that conspiracy needs to end because it's all very thoroughly documented. There's a debate, he continues, as to whether or not the Illuminati really were destroyed or whether it just went underground and still exists today. I think that debate is interesting and I have my opinions about it, but they're just opinions. In the final analysis, it's not too important because we know that there are shoots coming up and from the ground with identical structures all over the place. Now, whether these shoots are coming from the seeds or the roots, I don't think that makes too much difference. The fact is, we have many organizational initiations of the Illuminati, and this secret one that we're talking about here, credited by Cecil Rhodes, is a perfect example. He's speaking about the Rhodes Trust. Now, what is that structure I'm talking about, he asks? It's what they call, get this, it's what they call rings within rings within rings. It's literally Lord of the Rings, guys. It's literally the rings of power. And that's why they all wear the little ring symbol on their little cute little cardigan sweaters. That's the way they usually refer to it, he says. And what that means is this. Weishaupt said that in the center of his Illuminati organization, there would be a controlling group of maybe 3 or 4 people, just a small number. These, in turn, would create a membership ring around them of a larger number of perhaps 20 or 30 or something like, and the members of that ring would not be aware that they were being dominated and controlled by the inner circle above them. Now, that outer ring, in turn, thinking that they were the whole enchilada, would then create a larger ring around it, comprised of hundreds or perhaps thousands of people. And those people would not suspect that they were being dominated and directed by an inner ring. And then finally, that last ring would create still yet another one that would reach out to mass organizations and reach out to the masses. So basically, we've got rings, 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 rings. By the time you get to the big ring, now you're in the public square. And that is the ring that 99.9% of commenters in this space focus their research and analysis on. And I think that is a grave mistake. I want to bring the rings back in and find out who's the spiders at the top. That would be a better agenda here. Okay. But guys, just see that, like, you could say, I don't believe in political conspiracies all you want. Where are you getting your information? Which ring are you getting your information from? Do you even know? No, you don't, because it's secret. This is how criminal organizations are formed. This is how the grooming gangs and the rape gangs are formed. Rings within rings. This is how terrorist organizations are formed. Rings within rings. This is how these little cells that are producing these shooters and assassins and lone attackers are formed. This is how La Cosa Nostra, the mafia, was formed. This is how your religious institutions are formed. You go in and you sit there and you listen to the holy writ from the priesthood, and you're like, they're the top cheese, man. That's the guy. The next level above him is God. Sorry to burst your bubble. It's not how it works. There's rings within rings. And so would you be surprised that the government of Canada is run like this? The government of Australia is run like this? The European Union is run like this? The UN is run like this? The WEF? And then what's above that? And what's above that? And when do we get to a point where there is zero public knowledge of what's above that? Because it's so well concealed. At the very least, we're saying this system is a very intelligent system. It has been used in many different areas and organizations throughout history and throughout the world. And so to say as a theory that the elites of the world, who just so happen to be acting in concert with the same agenda, the same rhetoric, the same symbols, the same programs, the same policies, the same everything in various different countries around the Western world, all at the same time. Do you think that's a coincidence? Do you think that's a coincidence? I just really have trouble believing that it is. So then you're left with, well, how do I explain that phenomena? Well, everybody that's down on that big public square ring level is sitting there scratching their heads to this moment. And I'm like, are you ever going to start going, well, I can't explain it. So there's got to be another calculation here that I'm missing in my final analysis. There's got to be something to plug in. There's a data point missing here. Maybe the data point is secret societies and secret organizations and rings within rings, and, you know, understanding how clandestine control and infiltration works. The way he's describing the Illuminati is the way that Yuri Bezmenov described the Soviet Union setup. And we could keep going. Okay. So to me, This is not rocket science. This is very practical. This is very realistic. We don't have the smoking gun on the higher circles. Okay. We don't. We have theories. We have everybody's writing books. We have little glimmers. We have little shards. We've got some shadows on the wall, but we're seeing the effect in the world. We're seeing, and we've studied these organizations now. Gerard Griffin and all these guys who went and studied these organizations, studied not just watching YouTube videos. Okay. Ed Griffin and his ilk and that generation, they were the guys getting physical documentation, physical reports, the microfilm, the old tapes, the old transcripts, the notebooks from these guys, translating them from French and German and whatnot into English and then bringing it out, right? That's your Carol Quigley's. That's these guys. Okay. So, just remember that what's gone in, what level of research has gone into talking about this. Okay. So I just find it fascinating that I can pull up many different guys that didn't even know each other, and they'll basically give you the same story. And that's because they're following the same evidence. So to me, this is exactly how it's run. It makes perfect sense. It explains all the anomalies of what's going on and why people can't make sense and heads or tails of why suddenly their governments just turned on them and started destroying their economies and working against the best interest of their people. How do you explain that? You can only hang on the branch of the tree that says, well, they're just incompetent nincompoops that don't know what they're doing. They're just stupid. You can only hang on that branch for so long. Now there's a tornado flying around. That branch is about to break, and now you got nothing. When you look up, you realize the whole tree is what you've been missing. That there's a conspiracy afoot in the world. Is that human beings are conspiratorial by nature, right? If we can't get what we want doing it the right way, what do? We cheat, lie, steal, and murder to get what we want. It's not that much of a stretch, folks. Okay. Where was I? Yeah. And then finally, the last ring would create still another one that would reach out to the mass organizations, reach out to the masses. And in that fashion, Weishaupt said that a few of us in the center, through this carefully controlled structure of rings within rings, can control the world. And the people being controlled would never know that that's how it worked. It's genius. Now that's the structure that Weishaupt created and described at some length. And it's interesting to me that Rhodes selected that very exact structure for his secret society. Could it be because he was a member, maybe even just ideologically? And don't forget, we proved also in previous shows that the Illuminati was left-wing ideologically, okay? Revolution, violence, infiltration, take the means of production. It's a power grab that's layered in brotherhood and freedom for all and equality. That's just PR for the people in the outer ring circle that don't understand how this works. This is criminality right now we're talking about, okay? Continuing on, he says, now let's take a look. I'm glad there's not a lead attached to that. But you know what's funny? I'm reading a transcript. So they're talking, it's like real time, like something dropped on the table while he was talking. So now he's making a joke. Okay. So sorry, let me get to the actual. Okay. The results of all this, he says, ladies and gentlemen, is that this structure, this secret society remains invisible to the average person. It remains invisible not only because of its structure and because of its secrecy, but also because it has had the foresight of not having a name. Like, it doesn't even call itself the Illuminati, okay? Now, just think about that for a minute. If you say that you have an organization or you can create an organization and somebody says, well, what we were going to call ourselves, and the answer is, we're not going to call ourselves anything at all. It'll be the name of no name. We're not going to have one. That way, nobody can talk about us. It's bloody brilliant. And that's what they decided to do. Quigley himself doesn't know how to describe it. At some places in his books, he calls it the network. In other places, he calls it the Rhodes group. In other places, he just calls it the group because it has no name. And honestly, guys, that's why I just started calling it the high table. I got it from John Wick. And I wonder where the writers of John Wick got that, by the way, because they call themselves, that's the other thing in the video. We had the circle of initiates with the rings within rings. And then they call themselves the round table, the Cecil round table, Cecil Rhodes round table. Round table, round table. Where have we heard about round tables before? Oh, from all the knightly tales from the medieval lore about the Knights of the Round Table. King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table, huh? I love this one. Where was the first round table before King Arthur? Where's the round circle that different objects or creatures or beings sit around? It's the pie in the sky, baby. It's the zodiac, as in the book of Job, the Mazzaroth, the circle in the sky, right? Johnny Cash, circle in the sky. Right? It's the circle in the sky. It's the zodiac. The round table with its 12 partitions of 12 nights is the 12 partitions of the zodiac. It's the 12 hours of the day. It's the 12 months in the year. It's the 12 disciples, the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12, 12, 12. The universe does things in 12s. So they model it off of that. So don't forget, the argument is that these are pirates. The people who have created these rings of power for the purpose of power and domination over all land resources and human beings, these are not the good guys. They hijacked what good men had created and warped it into a system for achieving power. That's their religion. You want to know what religion they come from? You want to know what group they come from? Because everyone's like, who's doing this? Is it the Jesuits? Is it the Jews? Is it the Catholics? Is it the Masons? Is it the Knights Templars? Is it the Rosicrucians? Is it this? Is it the Rhodes Scholars? Their religion is power. So anybody that falls into, you can call them Satanists or set-ins or negationists or whatever you want to call it. Those who are here to create chaos, ruin, and disorder for the purposes of getting power dynamics. That's what they are. They're psychopaths. They're primary psychopaths. So what does a primary psychopath that has no empathy do if he can't create a structure that would actually facilitate his psychopathic agenda? Well, you go find out the structures that already work with humanity. Oh, and like he said, humans like to be in groups. We like to be forming institutions because there's positives to doing that. That's how you build society. That's how you build civilization. You have communities, you have families, you have countries, right? And what you do is you copy what good people do, because then good people will keep coming into your house, right? Without asking any questions. They don't know you're a wolf in sheep's clothing. A la Fabian's society, right? They don't know that. People just trust. We're like a bunch of deers. We just trust naively and blindly everybody that walks up and says the things we like to hear. So all they did was go, let's master the things they like to hear. Let's get into the houses of light that they've created. Let's infiltrate their institutions and pretend like we're on their team. And then let's use their organizational structure that maybe had a valid purpose once upon a time of protecting this knowledge and wisdom of how to build the building blocks of civilization. And let's co-opt it and repackage it back to them and even use it. This is even in actual letters between Weishaupt and some of the other Illuminati heads in this conspiracy in Bavaria, where they're like, well, we're going to use the Masonic order structure so that we can conceal our agenda behind their lodge doors. So this also tells you, even the Masons didn't know this. Many of them today still don't know it. They're all lower degrees. They're in the outer rings. They're not at the top rings. Otherwise, in military terms, they call this process compartmentalization of knowledge. It's how every corporation works. It's how every government works, right? Where did they get it from? We got it from these guys. Where did these guys get it from? The original druids and pharaohs and ancient, peoples who built civilization and cultures that lasted thousands of years. And they went, hey, that works. We'll build our enterprise off that model. So just giving you a little background. He continues on. At the inner circle of this organization that I'm describing, that was called the Society of the Elect. It originally consisted of Cecil Rhodes and a small brain trust of his very wealthy and influential political cronies from British politics and British banking. The center of gravity, as I said earlier, shortly thereafter, after Rhodes' death, didn't take long before the center of gravity shifted away to the Rockefeller Group, which was very quick to move into that circle. And now we see that there are centers or secondary centers of influence within the Rockefeller Group and centers. Within such organizations as the Bilderberg Group and the Trilateral Commission, to name just a few. And in the video, he mentioned the CFR, Council on Foreign Relations. Hillary Clinton. The goal shifted away from creating a world empire based in England to a world empire based in New York called the New World Order, but based on the model of collectivism. New York keeps coming up. Huh? The gangs of New York, the 5 points. What's up with New York? Why is it such a epicenter of these gang members? How did they just elect an Islamo-communist into their rank? Like, how did that happen? What's really happening behind the scenes, right? And what is actually being exposed to us right now? Everybody should be taking notes. If you have the backstory, which is what I call the playbook, everything becomes very easy to understand. Okay. So to me, this isn't a surprise that they switched from England as the main center to New York. Now, you could also look at it like they just have, it's like a franchise. There's the central hub. Maybe it's on the bloody moon or something. I don't know. The central hub, maybe it's in Switzerland. I don't know where. And then you've got all your little, like the Roman Empire, you've got your little satellite nexuses all over the place. So New York could just be yet another nexus. But they based it on collectivism. The secondary rings around the Society of the Elect that Cecil Rhodes created were called round tables, after the Knights of the Round Table, Knights of Malta, Knights Templars, gets into that whole story. That's the name they gave them, round tables. And these existed in the United States, Britain, and all of the former British dependencies, like in Canada. That's what we are, guys. That's when he says British dependencies, that's Canada. We're a British vassal state of the Crown Corporation. Finally, there was a territory group or ring around that which was created. Each of those round tables in each of the countries created yet another ring larger around it. And they called those in most of the British dependencies the Royal Institute for International Affairs, otherwise known as the Chatham House. Who was the president of Chatham House before he came to Canada, pretended to be Canadian, and became our prime minister overnight and swore an allegiance to the King of England? Who was that? Tell me in the chat. You guys all know. So that's a big one. Also, you know who else writes about this? I should do a whole breakdown on this from the perspective of John Coleman, Dr. John Coleman and his Committee of 300. He gets deep. He does a whole chapter on the Royal Institute of International Affairs. Thanks for reminding me, Ed. I'm going to go with his stuff next. He says, you'll find that in England, you'll find it in Canada, and so forth. That's what it's called. It's still there. Very powerful. Yeah, I think in Canada it's called Canadian Council of Chief Executives. It's still there. Very powerful, prominent institutions in British politics and all these countries. In the United States, for some reason, which I've never been able to find out, they didn't choose that name. I suppose because royal wouldn't be an acceptable word in the United States. So they customize it for each population. And in the US, they call it the Council on Foreign Relations. The Holy Council, right? And ladies and gentlemen, after 100 years of penetration into the power centers of society, the Rhodesian network, I call it, so the Rhodes network, I call it the Rhodesian network. After 100 years, the Rhodesians are very close to the final achievement of their goals in the Western world. Now, I add the phrase in the Western world because we must not lose sight of the fact when we're looking into this group that there's another group out there which is just as dangerous and as secret and just as cunning as the Rhodesians. And they, by the way, took a clue from the Rhodesians and they got rid of their name a few years ago. We used to call them communists, and then they got rid of that name. They pretended to go away. They pretended that they crumbled overnight, a great miracle. They are still there. I call them the Leninists. They have never renounced the theories or the goals of Lenin. They just renounced communism. Well, they never really had communism in any of those countries anyway, but always refer to themselves as socialists or Leninists or what have you. But all the old, or democratic socialists, but all the old former communist commissars simply took their hat off that said communist on the front of it and turned it around, and now it says social democrat. But you notice it's the same head underneath the hats. The heads didn't change, nor did their real policies. Guys, did you see what he's talking about? This is huge. I didn't know this for years until I got into the fine print. I went, oh my God. That's why I did You can go on my Substack right now. I've got it there for you. This is a premium one. I'm keeping it premium. And it's the occult roots of communism. And I get through that and I show you name by name, line by line, fact by fact from brilliant scholars who tell you the story of how we have a group called the Philadelphians. We have the Jacobins. We have these groups going around in the 1700s, around the same time as this Bavarian Illuminati thing going on, by the way, who are crafting a public version, something that would be digestible for the public, that actually has its origin in the secret societies and in the occult world. And we call that ideology. It's an ideology that was baked together like cookies by these people. They baked it with the right ingredients and they went, this is the best chocolate chip cookie we've ever made. Everybody's going to take a bite of this one. It's irresistible. And we call it communism or socialism. Same shit, different pile, right? That's a big bombshell. So what he's saying is that there's a group that's close to the Rhodesians that copied the same blueprint as the Rhodes scholars, as the Illuminists, and they call themselves communists. Is it a stretch? Is it really a stretch to think that maybe they're the same person? You know, the same type of person, the same ideological hooks, the same motivations, the same drive for power. It might even be the same network that went underground, just like the Templars did after they were allegedly all executed. And all they did was execute some of the head knights. But everybody forgets that the Templars weren't run by knights. Those knights were illiterate. They couldn't even read and write. They're out there just doing what knights do. They're the muscle. They're the security force. They're the curb stompers. Okay? Who directs them? Who has the knowledge? Who created the biggest international banking fraternity before it was even cool? The clerical orders behind the Templars. You got to get into the work of Michael Tsarian to understand that. If you go to his Female Illuminati website, many articles there. You can even go to michaeltsarian.com and he goes chapter and verse on the history of the Templars. He puts the Templars up very close to the tippy top, by the way. And when he says Templars, he's talking about this rogue clerical order that captured the Templars. So not just knights. They're just doing the grunt work for the guys who do the paperwork and the legal work, the clerics, the priests, the occultists, the wizards and warlocks, right? That's what people need to know is the difference. Is it a coincidence that they all work off the same blueprint? I say no. He goes, I want to emphasize that there is another very large and powerful dangerous group out there, which I call the Leninists, and the Leninists and the Rhodesians are often seen warring against each other. Let's take a look at Mr. Bush in Washington. He's talking to George Bush. In DC and in Venezuela, we've got Chavez. Now, there's a perfect example of the Rhodesians versus the Leninists, and they fight each other. They're opposed to each other. They criticize each other. They even hate each other. But the world that they want is the same. Guys, where have we seen this pattern before? If you've been on my show for a little bit. This pattern of where on the surface, there's these internecine battles happening amongst these competing groups, leftists versus rightists. You got the woke left, you got the woke right. You got the fascists, you got the communists. You got the Nazis, you got the Russians. You got the this, you got the that. Huh? You got the Templars, you got the Hospitallers. The Templars and Hospitallers used to have battles amongst each other. Yeah, but then they're all now the same organization, same goal, same blueprint. The fascists and the Nazis and the communists, they're fighting for power. They all hate each other, right? You all need to find out they're financed by the same people and they have the exact same blueprint. It's just tailored to different types of people, different demographics, different classes, different religions. Doesn't work the same in the Middle East as it does in Europe. Doesn't work in Europe the same way that it does in America. So you got to have different flavors of Gatorade to everybody to enjoy the same poison. This is the real shit now. This is beyond all the public square nonsense that you're all getting brought to your attention. This is, for me, the advanced class now, right? When you get to that level. If you're not at that level, you can identify a little bit of this, but you're going to be behind the curve, sadly. So you got to get into this now. But I just found that interesting. Same pattern. So the only thing they disagree with is not ideology, he says. It's who is going to run this new world order. So what the real top dogs did at the high table, the well above top level, the aliens on the moon or whatever the fuck. Okay, we're just using that. I'm using that facetiously. Or am I? And there's a high level ring here that is sitting back and letting nature unfold, right? You create the games, you create the teams, and then you watch the football match. Who wins? Oh, those guys won. Let's use their model over here. Oh, and then over here, this little skirmish. Oh, let's see who wins that. Oh, okay, those guys won. All right, well, let's use those guys. Let's use their model over here. And over time, you organize the data, and then you come up with the best cookie recipe of all time. One cookie to rule all the other cookies, one ring of power. And now you can create your new world order that will be the one prescription for the world. You can't just get to that. That's everybody thinks these guys can just, they're so powerful, they snap their fingers and they have a world order. No, it is far harder to organize the entire planet around one central ring of power than you can possibly imagine. Okay. Because everybody is wanting their own power, right? So you have to find a way to guide their aspirations so that they, thinking that they're facilitating their own agenda, are actually working for the high table agenda. Listen up, commies and Islamists. You're being used by way higher forces that are far more intelligent. Trust me. So that's interesting. So the only thing they disagree with is not ideology. They ideologically are the same. It's who's going to run the New World Order, the so-called left, or will it be the so-called right? And when you peel off all those labels and you look underneath, you'll find that in all of these camps, what they really stand for is collectivism. That's his word for just centralized control under collectivism. One leash for many necks. That's the word we should be using, he says. They're all collectivists in nature, but then they wrap themselves in flags and different rhetoric, and they appear to oppose each other on the surface. But I want to emphasize, he says, just because we are focusing tonight on one group does not mean that is the only piece we need to keep our guard up, because we have another equally potential group very much alive in the world today. Now, that is my summary. It's time now to let the conspirators describe it themselves, and so I'm going to do some reading for you. And I'm going to be reading within reading for you. It's like a dream within a dream. I hate to read a lot in a speech, he says, but in this case, I feel that I have to, because otherwise you'd think that I was making all of this up. So I'm going to do a little extensive reading and let you see that the conspirators themselves really have said basically what I've said. We'll begin first in Tragedy and Hope by Carroll Quigley when he says this, quote, "I know of the operation of this network." See how he calls it a network? "Because I have studied it for 20 years and was permitted for 2 years during the 1960s to examine its papers and secret records. I have no aversion to it or to most of its aims, and have for much of my life been close to it and to many of the instruments. In general, my chief difference of opinion is that it wishes to remain unknown." Now, on the Anglo-American establishment, Quigley says this: "The Rhodes Scholarship," the one that Chrystia Freeland is now running, at least on the surface, "established by the terms of Cecil Rhodes' seventh will, are known to everyone. What is not so widely known is that Rhodes, in 5 previous wills, left his fortune to form a secret society, which was to devote itself to the preservation and expansion of the British Empire. And what does not seem to be known to anyone is that this secret society continues to exist to this day." Keep in mind, this is from Dr. Carroll Quigley. He was professor at Georgetown University, and he mentored Bill Clinton. Okay, this isn't some wackadoodle on TikTok that's talking here, okay? So to be sure, it is not a childish thing like the Ku Klux Klan, and it does not have any secret robes, secret hand clasps, or secret passwords. It does not need any of these things, since its members know each other intimately. It probably has neither oaths of secrecy nor any formal procedure of initiation. It does, however, exist and holds secret meetings. This group, as I shall show, is one of the most important historical facts of the 20th century. That's pretty heavy. Now, Ed continues. Now, one of the original leaders of this group, one of the organizers, was a fellow by the name of William Stead. William Stead was so important that he was the executor of Cecil Rhodes' will, so he should know what he's talking about. He wrote a book entitled The Last Will and Testament of C.J. Rhodes, and in that book, William Stead said this, quote, Mr. Rhodes was more than the founder of a dynasty. He aspired to be the creator of one of those vast semi-religious, quasi-political associations which, like the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, have played so large a part in the history of the world. To be more strictly accurate, he wished to found an order as the instrument of the will of the dynasty. So you see, they're looking at this as an order. It's not just a group or an organization. It's an order, like the Knights Templar or something like that. It's a chivalric order. In Cecil Rhodes' handwritten manuscript, this was not published until fairly recently, we find this coming directly from Cecil Rhodes' own pen. He said, I contend that we English are the finest race in the world, and that the more of the world we inhabit, the better it is for the human race. What scheme could we think of to forward this object? I look at the history and I read the story of the Jesuits. I see what they are able to do in a bad cause, and I might say under bad leaders. In the present day, I became a member of the Messianic order. Sorry, the Messianic order? What? I see the wealth and the power they possess, the influence that they hold, and I think over their ceremonies, and I wonder what a large body of men can devote themselves to what at times appear to be the most ridiculous and absurd rites, without an object and without an end. The idea gleaming and dancing before one's eyes like a will-o'-the-wisp at last frames itself into a plan. Why should we not form a secret society, but with one object, the furtherance of the British Empire, the bad one, by the way, okay? Make sure we differentiate that. And the bringing of the whole uncivilized world under British rule, meaning one ring of power. So there you have it, Ed says, from the mind of the founder. Now back to Quigley. In his words, he says that the goal of the secret society was, quote, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. Unquote. The system was to be controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world, acting in concert by secret agreements arrived at in frequent private meetings and conferences. Now you see the trilateral meetings and the Bilderberg meetings begin to take on more significance when you realize that's really part of this plan. Now, on page 4 of the Anglo-American Establishment, Quigley says this, quote, this organization has been able to conceal its existence quite successfully, and many of its most influential members, satisfied to possess the reality rather than the appearance of power, are unknown even to those close students of British history, partly because of the deliberate policy of secrecy which this group has adopted, partly because the group itself is not closely integrated, but rather appears as a series of overlapping circles or rings, partly concealed by being hidden behind formally organized groups of no obvious political significance. So there's Quigley given the rings within rings thing. And then regarding the conspiratorial structure of this group, Quigley tells us this. In the secret society, Rhodes was to be the leader. Stead, Brett, Lord Dasher, and Milner were to form an executive committee called the Society of the Elect. Arthur, Lord Balfour, Sir Harry Johnston, Lord Rothschild, Albert Lord Grey, and others were listed as potential members of Circle Initiates. So potential, doesn't mean they all made it. While there was to be an outer circle known as the Association of Helpers. And he's got a bracket here. Those phrases, ladies and gentlemen, that I just read are lifted from Adam Weishaupt directly. Those are his exact phrases, talking about the Association of Helpers, etc. Okay? This was later organized by Milner as the Round Table Organizations. After the death of Cecil Rhodes, the organization fell under the control of Alfred Lord Milner, who recruited young men from the upper class of society to become part of the Association of Helpers. This group of young men, so this is back to Ed Griffin now, this group of young men recruited from the higher levels of British society was unofficially called at that time Milner's Kindergarten. Milner's young global leaders. Milner's kindergarten. Interesting. Of course, they were young men. They were coming up in politics and in banking, and they came from the finest families, but they called them Milner's kindergarten because they worked very closely together and they tutored them and helped them get into positions of authority, especially in government. I mean, isn't that what the WEF just did to us? They were placed into the power centers of society, and eventually they became the roundtable organizations in each of those countries. And so they were the inner circle of a larger circle around them. So Chrystia Freeland is nowhere near the top of the cake. Okay. This is public virtue signaling and pretend. That's what it is. Okay. But they are part of those initiate circles. There are many who are ignorantly part of it. Okay. They just want to get ahead in their career. They don't give a shit. They don't know any of the backstory, but they just follow orders. Right. But make no mistake about it, it goes way up, well above them. While reviewing all of this, it's important for us to keep in mind that the primary purpose of a secret society is, are you ready for this, guys? Are you ready to learn what the primary focus of a secret society is? Here it is. To keep secrets. There you go. This isn't rocket science. That's pretty obvious, he says, but that means that one of their major objectives is deceit. You have to be deceitful if you're going to keep secrets. Even if you simply say, I don't know which Hillary Clinton, I was just informed, who probably attended the last Bilderberg meeting, when asked on camera, did she attend the Bilderberg meeting? She said, I don't know anything about that. I guess the reporter said, well, your husband attended the last one. And she said, oh, did he? I don't know anything about it. That's what you would expect if you have an affiliation with a secret society. You'd better be prepared for a little bit of deceit, or you're not a good member. Although Hillary Clinton did admit that she was a member of the CFR and actually was very happy that the CFR headquarters ended up being like downtown Washington so that they could like literally walk to get their marching orders. That's what she said. There's a quote. You can go look it up. So anyways, to the gullible public, these people deny their plans and their goals, obviously, because the public, for the large part, would not necessarily understand them in an approving way. Right. Yeah. Because if we got the fine print on this, about what our governments are doing, these guys are just agents for these people, none of us would go for it. That's why we're all getting pissed off by all the policies right now, because they're in the implementation phase. And we're going, wait, what? They're selling off all our land? What? They're giving all our money to other countries, and we're all like having debt crisis and housing crisis and food crisis and all like economic crisis. Yet they're sending hundreds of millions of dollars today out of our country to other countries for transgender programs and God knows what. Okay. So we're all starting to see the agenda and we're getting pissed off about it, but we don't know the origin. That's because the fine print of the agenda, not the rhetoric of the politicians or the CBC News, the fine print of the actual agenda is starting to come into fruition. That's why you're getting pissed off. If you had the whole plan on your desk, you would all be revolting in the streets right now. And I'm not even saying that's the way to deal. I'm just saying you would react extremely differently than this holding pattern that we're all in. Nobody would take this. Nobody would want this. Okay. I've got quotes from Bertrand Russell, one of the founders of the Royal Society, highly respected philosopher, right? He's saying our goal is to bring in world socialism. In order for that to happen, we need to significantly reduce the human population. I put that in chapter 10 of Cult of the Medics. You can go look it up. I've done other shows on it. It just came to my mind. Think about that. They want world socialism, but they know there's a calculation problem that Ludwig von Mises and Hayek and all these guys pointed out to them, that you're violating natural law. This won't work. You're going to have to reprogram and re-engineer humanity. And you have a numbers problem. You have a math problem. Look at Mao's China. Look at all the examples of where it fails. So they don't just go, oh, well, maybe our premise is wrong and we should switch our model. They go, how do we make this work? Got to make the ring of power. Too many eggs, too many heads running around. We got to cull the herd. and we're going to force this square peg into a round hole. We're going to make it happen. If you understood this and you understood that beneath all the policies happening, UN level, all the way down to your government, all of you would reject it. I don't care left, right, upside down. I don't care what you identify as. None of you would, because it's it's against your interests. It's against your financial interests. It's against your interests as a walking, living, breathing human being that desires freedom and liberty. It is against your survival interests. Okay? So nobody would go along with this plan. That's why it had to be secret. If it was so amazing, if it was all love and light, if it was truly humanitarian, they wouldn't need to cover it up and hide it and employ the methods of murder, conspiracy, sedition, crimes against humanity, infiltration, deception, lawfare, gaslighting, right? They wouldn't need to employ those strategies if they were doing good in the world, guys. That's also very simple to understand. So I just want to point that out. So he continues. Yeah. So they lie a lot, he says. But when they speak to themselves in their own private papers and before conclaves, which are expected to remain confidential, they often tell the whole unvarnished truth. Every once in a while, if you're researching all their papers, you'll find a little gem like the one I'm going to read to you now. This one was written by one of the Milner's kindergarten. His name you'll recognize, Arnold Toynbee. He's a renowned historian. He was a professor at the London School of Economics. He was a director of studies at the Royal Institute of International Affairs, which was a front for the Round Table. He was a British intelligence agent and author of that very famous 12-volume history of the world called A Study of History, which extols the virtue of the world government and collectivism. And so he's a pretty big guy. In November 1931, in that issue of International Affairs, which was published as an insider publication just for members of that roundtable, this is what Toynbee said. And this is a gem. He said, quote, "I will hereby repeat that we are at present working discreetly, but with all our might, to wrest this mysterious political force called sovereignty out of the clutches of the local national states of the world. At all the time, we are denying with our lips what we are doing with our hands." Arnold Toynbee, glorified, a glorified individual. I believe too, I don't want to say it, don't quote me on it, but I also think he's KOM. I also think he's the Knight of Malta. And that, of course, makes sense. Ed says, people want to go to the members on the Council on Foreign Relations and say, are you guys really planning world government and loss of sovereignty and so forth? Oh, of course not, they say. Are you really planning to merge the United States with Canada and Mexico? It's absurd. This is just part of the game, and you must understand it. World government doesn't just happen by writing some articles or books. Only when people are in control of power centers of society can they bring about massive changes like this. Not scholarship, but power. Not public opinion, but power. Power is the key, and the power centers of society are what amalgamate and give these people power over citizens. How this came about, Quigley describes this. It's very interesting what he says. How did this come about? Through Lord Milner's influence. These men were able to win influential posts in government, in international finance, and become the dominant influence in British imperial affairs and foreign affairs up to 1939. In 1909 through 1913, they organized semi-secret groups known as roundtable groups in the chief British dependencies and the United States. So Canada, you're involved in that. They still function in 8 countries. The task was given to Lionel Curtis, who established in England and each dominion a front organization to the existing local roundtable group. This front organization, called the Royal Institute of International Affairs, had as its nucleus in each area the existing submerged roundtable group. In New York, it was known as the Council on Foreign Relations and was a front for J.P. Morgan and Company. At last, we come to this ubiquitous Council on Foreign Relations. You hear more and more about, even increasingly now in the news. They'll say, And here's a word from so and so on the Council on Foreign Relations office. And the average gum-chewing public says, that sounds good. I wonder what that's all about. So increasingly, this phrase CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, is becoming more and more at least common. People don't know what it is, but they've heard of it, so it's no longer frightening when they hear of it. So we are informed by Quigley and others that the Council on Foreign Relations was spawned by a secret society, which still exists today, that is a front for a roundtable group originally embodied in J.P. Morgan and Company, but now the Rockefeller Consortium, and that its primary goal is no longer the expansion of the British Empire, but global collectivism with control in private hands, administered in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world. So sorry, Tucker Carlson, when you're out there talking about how feudalism was just the bestest of the bestest, and we should probably just get feudalism going again in order to take out all these communists. I don't know, buddy. You're basically giving us chapter and verse, the CFR agenda. So what's going on? What's going on? Why are you talking like that? And I see a lot of people online parroting that exact same sentiment. And I just here to caution you that you're literally echoing Klaus Schwab's view of the world, JP Morgan, Rockefeller, the Illuminati, the Communist International, the Socialist International, the UN, the World Health. You are giving them, they're like, yes, we want the old medieval feudalist high table hierarchy set up again. And we're going to beat you over the head with a horrible ideology called communism so that you beg us to install it. Don't you see how this game works? It's time to wake up. Ed continues. Now, ladies and gentlemen, these are their words, not mine. Now, why is this important? It is important because the members of the Council on Foreign Relations are the rulers of America. Can I back that up? I think I can. Who are the members of the Council on Foreign Relations? It's a very long list. Actually, there are about 4,000 names. I think there's even more now. It's available, by the way, if you write to the Council on Foreign Relations office on your own letterhead, especially if it's a corporate letterhead. Say, I'd like a copy of the annual report, and you'll get it. I've been collecting these for many years. And in the back of each report, they have a list of the current members. And here's what I found. See, because like Ed Griffin grew up in a time when he didn't have like Chat GPT, which is just going to scan a bunch of mainstream news articles anyways. He went in and actually got it from the horse's mouth. That's real journalism for any journalists listening. Let's start with the presidents of the United States. Council members include Herbert Hoover, Dwight Eisenhower, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, James Carter, George Bush Sr., and William Clinton. Now, JFK once said that he was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, but I've not been able to find his name on any of the member lists. So he's confused over that. I guess he wanted to be out, but never quite made it in. Former president candidate John Kerry, Skull and Bones member, is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. And if anything should happen to President Bush, then Richard Cheney, Dick Cheney, would become president. And he is also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and also the Skull and Bones. Secretaries of state, undoubtedly to this group, are more important than presidents because the presidents often just take advice. There's so much going on. They've got their cabinet. They got people telling them what to do. And so the Secretary of State is a critical figure, a critical position in this new world order. And it's not surprising to find that just about every Secretary of State from the beginning has been a member of the CFR. Here's the list. Dean Rusk, Robert Lansing, Frank Kellogg, Henry Stinson, Cornell Hull, E.R. Stantius, George Marshall, Dean Acheson, John Foster Dulles, Christian Herter, Dean Rusk, William Rogers, Henry Kissinger, Cyrus Vance, Edmund Muskie, Alexander Haig, George Shultz, James Baker, Lawrence Egelberger, Warren Christopher, William Richardson, Madeleine Albright, Colin Powell, and of course, Condoleezza Rice. The Secretaries of Defense, a pretty important position if you're going to build a new world order and use coercion if necessary, include James Forrestal, George Marshall, Charles Wilson, Neil McElroy, Robert McNamara, Melvin Laird, Elliot Richardson, James Schlesinger, Harold Brown, Caspar Weinberger, Frank Carlucci, Richard Cheney, Les Aspin, William Perry, William Cohen, and Donald Rumsfeld. CIA directors, who were also Knights of Malta, Walter Smith, William Colby, Richard Helms, Alan Dulles, John McCone, James Schlesinger, George Bush Sr., Stansfield Turner, William Casey, William Webster, Robert Gates, James Woolsey, John Deutsch, William Studeman, George Tennant, Porter Goss, and Michael Hayden. Some better known corporations with CFR members at the board or chief executive levels. Oh, by the way, I want to say real quick, in Canada, the term you're going to look for if you want to find out the deep state here in Canada, like where the buck really starts and stops, kind of like with the CFR, you want to look into something called the Privy Council. That'd be a good place to start. And I'm not suicidal. I love life. Just want to say. Now, in the media, a pretty important place to be if you want to control public opinion, we find CFR members in management and operational positions at the following media corporations: the Army Times, the Associated Press, the Association of American Publishers, Barron's, Boston Globe, Business Week, Christian Science Monitor, Dallas Morning News, Detroit Free Press, Detroit News, USA Today, Wall Street Journal, LA Times, New York Post, San Diego Tribune, Times Mirror, Random House, on and on, Washington Times, New York Times, ABC, MSNBC, CNN, PBS, Disney. He's like, did we leave any out? I don't think so. Labor unions with CFR members in key positions at the top include AFL-CIO, United Steelworkers of America, United Auto Workers. So guys, a lot of this has started to change in the Trump era, but what he's giving you is the history of how they went in. So they got the media, they got the education system, they got the CIA, they got top level government organizations, they got the newspapers, they got the labor unions, right? So this is just how you capture a country. You don't have to fire a shot. It's called irregular warfare. And I think what we're dealing with today is a combination of threats all happening at the same time from enemies, both foreign and domestic, and that there are many competing groups. But what we're really getting at here is that sitting above them all is the predator class that's just waiting to see who wins out, right? And I think that's always been how they operate. Let's see if there's anything else here. We've got the universities, right? Yeah, university. Like, what's that university professor that's just been labeled in the Epstein files, and he just basically retired the other day in front of his class? So just understanding how the universities are captured. See, the way I think the Epstein thing fits into this is that's like a honeypot thing. Okay, that's how you get dirt on people. Because how do you hold these organizations together, do you think? If you were creating rings within rings and you were doing an international network to basically seize all the main key positions of power and influence in order to bring the agenda in, how would you do it? How would you hold that together? How could you rely that you're not going to get a bunch of people turning on you all the time? Because that's always the big critique. We're like, well, wouldn't the people blowing the whistle? Well, first of all, they did blow the whistle. My shows are filled with whistleblowers. We just read from a bunch of them. But how do you keep it together? Well, how does the criminal world keep its shit together? That's how I always just flip people on when I'm talking to them. And I'm talking about this high level conspiratorial network. And they start going, oh, this is a little too much for me, Dave. I'm like, okay, well, criminal mafias exist. The cartels from Mexico exist. Islamic Jihad exists. How do you think they hold their shit together for a long time? How do you think they get in and keep crime going? And the cops can just, their hands are out. Oh, we can't round up all the drug traffickers and the human traffickers and the people knifing. We can't, it's just too much crime. We don't have enough resources. Yet they're all just sitting there all day getting to ping you for speeding. So they clearly got some resources. And I remember they were all mobilized during track and trace to track you and track your phone and make sure you weren't hanging out with more than 3 people. So they got resources for that, but they don't have resources to arrest the top criminals that are pirating our entire societies and our streets right now and stop all the fentanyl coming in from China. They can't do that, right? No resources. Yeah, they can put your ass in jail for speaking out a turn on social media, but they can't go find human child traffickers. Interesting. So how do they do it? Blackmail is how they do it. It's not complicated. I'm telling you, it's simple. It seems complicated, but it's not. You blackmail people. You get compromising information on them. How do you do that? Well, you say, hey, go check out, you're up at the top now. Here's one of the perks. We got a guy, he's got a private jet, and he's going to fly you to this amazing island. You can have this amazing party. Go have a good time. The law doesn't apply. Enjoy. Enjoy. We'll bring in all the kids. We'll bring in all whatever you want. We'll bring it all there, all the coke, all the drugs. You want some adrenochrome? We got the best shit. Age 12 years, we got it, right? Go over on the island and have a good time. And the mean thing, the whole thing is being recorded. So they have compromising information on everybody. And then they just tell you, yeah, just, letting you know that if you ever, it's FAFO. So fuck around, find out. If you start spilling the beans, if you don't do exactly what we tell you when we call you on the red phone, we're going to release all that video footage and all those pictures of you with all those kids over there. Huh? It's not hard. That's how you hold criminals together. You see, criminals, you got to do something criminal in order to get the respect. You can't just go, let's shake on it and use honor among thieves. Like, they obviously aren't going to do that. So blackmail is probably one of the number one things that's used to hold this shit together. You can also go to threats. You can also go to like, I'm going to kill you and your family, like the old mafia. That's a very easy way to do it. You can bribe. You can go, hey, heads of Black Lives Matter, you want $5 million homes in Beverly Hills? Say no more. Boom, boom. Just keep doing what we say, right? Or whatever it's going to be. It's not hard. There's many ways that they can, in the Masonic world, they call this by hook or by crook. By hook or by crook, we will facilitate our agenda. This is how criminals work. It's not complicated in any way, shape, or form. Note, he continues, that this group, this Council on Foreign Relations, is not the inner core of a secret society. It's the third ring, or it is 2 rings out from the center at least. What does that mean? It means a lot of those people don't have the slightest clue as to who is directing them or why. They just joined the MLM, guys. They don't know who built the MLM, who runs the MLM, who gets all. They don't know shit about it. They're just like, yay, we're moving on in our careers. And don't forget that the ring beyond that is much bigger. That ring is called the Republican Democrat Party. That's the next ring out. And there are rings beyond that. None of those people know that they're being directed from the inside, you see. So these people are unaware, most of them. Some of them know, but most of them are totally unaware of the control or the purpose of the CFR. I think most of them are opportunists who look at the CFR as more or less a high-powered employment agency. If you were invited to become a member and you get on their membership list, you don't have to worry about a good job ever again, because every time these people are looking for a reliable, trustworthy person with the right mental outlook, and they are looking for someone to hire, they look on that membership list and they know that's a safe list. And so they're always going to be offered jobs. And people know that even though they may not know why. So a lot of them are just opportunists. You don't get on that list just because you're a good guy or a bad guy. You're carefully analyzed. You have to be invited by certain people and analyzed to show that you have this goal in your mind of internationalism, collectivism, and the New World Order. If you don't express a sympathy with that goal, you will never be invited to join the CFR or any of these roundtables like the Rhodes Trust. And even if you do have that goal, you may not be invited because now they want to look at you and see how potentially powerful you can be, how smart you are, what are your connections, what are you doing in life, and possibly they even look to see how ruthless you are. So which category would you put a Chrystia Freeland in? Top level cheese or opportunist, ideologically aligned? Would you say she's ideologically aligned with internationalism, collectivism, and the goals of the New World Order? I would say absolutely. That was what her purpose was in the Canadian government. And that is why she's getting promoted to the Rhodes Trust. Okay. He goes, I just want to emphasize that just because people are in the Council on Foreign Relations does not mean they're part of an inner core of the secret society. There are 3 rings we must understand about this group. One is they are not partisan. This is perhaps the most important thing for us to know today, is that this is not an issue of Republicans versus Democrats or, guys, any other partition in the public square. Religious, gender, sexual, it doesn't matter. They're just looking for cogs in the machine. Are you competent? Are you ideologically aligned with our agenda? Sign here in blood. Off you go. You find out about an equal number of Republicans and Democrats on this membership list. To these people, political partisanship is a joke. They have much bigger fish to fry. They use partisan politics as a gimmick to manipulate the thinking and the loyalties and the activities of the common man. None of these people are really Democrats or Republicans with the capital letters in front of them, only as a matter of convenience. That's the first thing to know. Guys, a lot of these people, they're putting costumes on. Like, look at the entire Conservative Party of Canada. All right. Like, do you find a conservative among them? Do you want to know why? Canada is one of the ground zeros of this circle of trust. Okay. The Fabians got in here in the 60s. All right. Got to look into that history. The second thing to know is that they are elitists. They intend to rule the world for the world's own good, of course, you understand. Yes. But they really believe that their vision of the New World Order based on the model of collectivism is the highest morality, and they intend to use any method whatsoever to bring that about. They consider that they are at war to bring that about, and people like you and me are the enemy in that war. We must be defeated. We must be annihilated. To them, they adopt the morality of war. What is the morality of war? Well, in wartime, there is only immoral act, and that is to lose. Or there's only one immoral act, and that is to lose the war. That's their mentality. You keep that in mind when you're dealing with these people. They are totally ruthless, and if necessary, to put innocent people in prison, so be it. If it's necessary to engineer an event that would cause the loss of thousands of American lives, so be it, because they are at war and they do not intend to lose. The third thing to know is that the method by which they intend to rule is called democracy. We're back to that word again now, democracy. The problem arrives: how does a ruling elite control the masses in an age where people have been conditioned to think that they should determine their own political destiny, especially when it comes to America? Maybe not so much in Canada. In Canada, we love being ruled. We love being serfs. Most Canadians love collectivism, sadly. But in America, at least, there was still the spirit of liberty, and they really had to try to make them believe that they were still free. So we've been taught like that in the classroom. We'll vote on everything, and our vote will make it correct. And as long as we're given the vote, everything is fine. We've been taught that. So how does the ruling elite deal with that mass psychology where everyone thinks that they should have a right to vote on their leaders and on the issues and so forth? The answer is quite simple. How do you keep the gum-chewing public out of the way? And that leads to the title of my presentation, which is the Quigley Formula. Quigley answers that question in his book. He says, to perpetuate the deception of democracy, to allow people to continue to think that they are participating in their own political destiny, all we have to do is create two political parties and control them both and let the idiots jump from one party to the next and choose one candidate adverse to the other, as long as they never get out of that two box trap that we set for them. Let them really battle each other on secondary issues. But when it comes to the final endgame of building a new world order based on the model of collectivism, all candidates in both parties must be in total agreement. That's the Quigley formula. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Did Quigley really say that? Yes, he did. Here's what he said, quote, "The national parties and their presidential candidates, with the Eastern establishment assiduously fostering the process behind the scenes, moved closer together and nearly met in the center with almost identical candidates and platforms. Although the process was concealed as much as possible by the revival of obsolescent or meaningless war cries and slogans, often going back to the Civil War. The argument that these two parties should represent opposed ideals and policies, one perhaps of the right and the other of the left, is a foolish idea except to the doctrinaire and the academic thinkers. Instead, the two parties should be almost identical so that the American people can throw the rascals out at any election without leading to any profound or extreme shifts in policy. Either party in office becomes in time corrupt, tired, unenterprising, and vigorless. Then it should be possible to replace it every 4 years if necessary by the other party, which will be none of these things, but which will still pursue with new vigor approximately the same basic policies." I have just described the Canadian political landscape that has been happening for decades now. It is exactly that. You get to vote for high table initiate A or high table initiate B. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Quigley formula. And if it sounds familiar, it's because we have been living under that formula since at least World War I. Just think about that. Not 1 in 1,000 people has been aware of it. Now, what are these basic policies that Quigley is talking about? It is anything that advances the New World Order based on the model of collectivism. The candidates and the parties should be fierce campaigners. They should attack each other with great vigor, but when the elections are over, they will work as a team for their common goals. All else is showmanship. As long as they are advancing the goal of the New World Order based on the model of collectivism, then everything else is just showmanship. So look what just happened with the voting in Canada of the new economic bill. The economic, we haven't had, just for American friends or anybody catching up, Canada has not had a budget in like a couple of years now. Like we've just been operating without a budget. So finally we table a budget. Finally, the Liberal government tables a budget. And it turns out to literally be the World Economic Forum, Big Bang, UN agenda. Okay. And it's based on the model of collectivism. And it barely squeaked in, but interesting to see who voted it and who basically stood back and let it happen. The Conservatives let it happen, right? And we've seen this over and over again. So we don't have an opposition party to the regime right now in Canada. You just have regime A and regime B, all right? And they bat the ball and nothing ever really comes to fruition. And off we go further and further into the debt spiral, further and further towards totalitarianism, further and further towards the New World Order agenda based on collectivism. This is how it works. Just about every major political event in American politics since World War II is a good example if you know what to look for. But let's not go all the way back. Pick it up with, let's say, the Panama Canal. The Carter administration gave away the Panama Canal, as you know, and nobody wanted that. The voters didn't want that. Republican voters didn't want that. Democrat voters didn't want that. They conducted polls among the American people, and the poll was overwhelmingly, 85% or something, about how to save the Panama Canal for the American people. And the other 15% just didn't care. I mean, they just didn't have an opinion. And yet they gave away the Panama Canal. Why? Who were these elected representatives serving? That happened to have been the goal of the Council on Foreign Relations, and the drive to give away the Panama Canal was led on both sides of the aisle by members of the Council on Foreign Relations. Okay. And then he goes on and he's going to give a bunch of examples. And I think I'll end reading that there. It's just because I'm reading like a 4-hour presentation. But just to, like, how many things has the Canadian government, or even like I live in BC, you're in a province, right? That overwhelming amount of people on both sides of the aisle, or I guess in Canada, I should say all sides, because there's many different political parties here. There's two dominant ones always, but then there's all the little small ones. And there's these projects and like pipelines and things like that, that like everybody agrees, hey, we should probably do that. And then there's a small, tiny, loud minority that says, no, save the environment. Who needs electricity and power? We'll just go back to the Stone Age, but save like these kind of people. It's a small group. Most people, no matter what side, they just want to get on with life, and they're already struggling to pay bills and get along. So, when most people are against these things, yet those things still happen, and there's no pushback or anything coming from any of the major parties, it's just all a bunch of gaslighting and rhetoric. This is the frustrations I'm hearing from the average Canadian right now. And I'm telling them, I'm like, you're so caught up with the local politics that you're not seeing the bigger picture. You don't know the history of this because no one told you, and you wouldn't listen to anybody that would anyways. So there you go. There's that. But you got to look at the big picture. No matter where you're listening to in the world, if you're looking at this as a local politics issue that will be solved by local politics, not to say we can't make big impacts on local politics. I'm not saying that. I'm not a doomer completely. I think there's definitely some things you can do. You can have these smaller groups, like in BC, we got different smaller groups that are trying to fight back and whatever. But those are grassroots movements that are not part of the circle. They're not going to have success. Okay, until the criminals are routed out and you know, the glory of the kingdom returns. But I'm not holding my breath on that, especially in the Canadian context right now. So the average Canadian citizen or the average person living in BC or whatever province you're in, their energies are caught up in the local humdrum of local issues. Like even all this land claim stuff going on in British Columbia, my province. It's pretty frightening. It's getting really out of hand. And now this is happening all over. They've just weaponized the First Nations and the natives with the people and this whole divisionary tactic. And I think this is coming from higher up. This is like China. This is high table, WEF. You'll own nothing and be happy. We're basically taking all your land, right? You got King Charles, doing some very interesting things behind the scenes. And I think there's a lot of downhill effects that we're seeing. And then again, maybe those local tribes, they've got their agenda of getting their land back or whatever it is that they want, but they're being used. They're being used, right? We're all being used. That's how real cunning movements operate, is they use you. You don't feel like you're being used, but you are for a higher purpose. And so I'm just here to say, and J. Edward Griffin is here to say, that it's important that we get the big 40,000 foot view here. We got to understand where this came from. When I was using that word occult before in my presentations, that word is talking about something that's hidden. It's something hidden, but something that can be known. Okay. Because there's things that are hidden from humanity that we just can't know yet, right? There's the mysteries of reality or whatever. But there's the things that are known that are hidden, which means they have the potential to be known. That's occult. Okay. It's kind of like the subconscious part of your mind versus the conscious part of your mind. The subconscious part is the occult mind. It's the occult. It's the hidden. It's the drives behind what's happening with the conscious mind. And you consciously think things are happening, but you don't know they're being motivated by subconscious or occult forces, or mental processes, right? So if we take the individual, we think of it as a fractal, we bring it out to the political world, because the political world is just made up of a bunch of human individuals with psyches, with brains, and with minds that operate in this way. That's why occult shit works. Okay. And what we're talking about here is occult groups that exist, that have agendas, that are very powerful, that have infiltrated key positions of power and influence in your society, that have an occult agenda that can be known because it's been whistleblown for a long time, but that most people either don't want to know, don't believe it's possible, or just remain completely ignorant and not knowing. But it doesn't change the fact that the operation is underway. And then you just keep getting beaten over the head with it. It gets closer to your doorstep day by day, week by week, month by month. And you start going, wow, this is really impacting me personally now. My finances, my cost of living, my education of my children, the propaganda they're being exposed to. Look at the plight of our country. Look at the plight of other countries going through the exact same thing at the exact same time. We're getting the glimmers here of the putting into practice the high table agenda. And that's why you're seeing it. And that's why you're pissed off. And that's why you're confused and you're wondering who's doing this. Well, the thing is, it's hard to pin down. But at the very least, with this kind of research, with what I've given you today, you're getting a little peek through the window. You're getting a little peek behind the curtain. And then it's up to you to go and continue to look into it further and update. That's the job of people like me and you and everybody watching right now. Ed Griffin and all these people that I've been citing over these last shows and for many years now. Okay. And we've also been doing this on the Unslaved Project, listing name after name and book after book and people that have exposed this at a very high level. Our job is to update it with what's going on right now, which is why when these events happen, like a little thing that everybody doesn't notice, they're all busy talking about all the other stuff. Someone like a Chrystia Freeland getting promoted up the chain to one of these international organizations, one of the main ones, one of the original ones. And then you find out our current prime minister was in multiple leadership positions within this network at different stages right in Britain. He's literally a king's man. So these are things that we can go, right, I've heard about this before. We can go to that older research and then we can bring it up to the present and go, okay, this is where this fits today. This is where this agenda is happening today in our time right now. And we can see it happening. Okay. So that's why this is valuable. That's why I wanted to come on and do this for you. Took a couple hours of your time. I just hope it was worth it. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to wrap up the show. Or maybe I'll go through a couple of your comments. If I see anything good here, we'll say goodbye. And then I want you to go and follow up on this. This is something that you as an individual listening, you can empower yourself with the knowledge of what's happening, all the names, all the organizations, start digging. And then once you have that mapped out, start paying attention. When those organizations come up, when high profile people who have just previously been wrecking your country and your economy get put into other positions within the network, take notes, document everything. That's the job. Because hopefully one day, enough people wake up in the Western world to start really turning this around. And I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it in America, seeing it in places like Poland and Argentina and some of these other places. Even in the Arab world, there's certain turnarounds that are happening in other places in the world, right? Australia, there's movements happening that are resisting this. So the job is to document everything. And if we get to a point where because this agenda has to come out in full blast at some point. It's been behind the curtain. It's creeping out more and more. The tactics change a little bit. Some of the shuffling occurs, but it just keeps coming back to the same agenda, right? It has to fully bear itself out to the world. It can't be hidden anymore. We're in that time now. Okay. It's right out in the open for everybody to see. And it's going to get even more. It's going to get more intense because it's coming out more and more. All the things you didn't read, the fine print is coming out to the surface. And if we get to a point where we can actually prosecute and identify and try these people that have done this to our countries, we need as much evidence and information and documentation of every single step made possible. And also, while you're documenting it, it's not just for some Nuremberg 2, it's going to be to help educate your fellows around you so that you can enlighten them about what's really happening. If we get a better and I'm not even saying we have it all here, like we've got a lot. There could be errors, there could be things we still need to perfect. I don't have it all figured out by any means. I'm just giving you what I know from the people who know what they know, and we're just trying to put this puzzle piece together and solve this mystery. But the key thing is we can all agree criminal factions have taken our means of production in our countries here in the West. They are working against our best interest as a people, as a civilization, as a nation, as individuals. They're working against those agenda. They're saying on the surface they're working for us. They're working for humanitarianism. They're working for freedom. They're working for it's Canada strong. And don't worry, we're going to just keep buying stuff from ourselves and everything's going to be just fine. The budget will balance itself. It's all going to be okay. They'll keep saying that while the data shows otherwise. Document those things. Take notes on it. Back it up. Share it. Make content. Write something. If you don't like talking to people on a camera, write it. Do posts all over social media. Do it in a way that's not overly aggressive or combative. Do it in a way that's inviting conversation, inviting people to like activating their curiosity. It's way more effective than being combative all the time. And that's how you can make change. Okay. But at the very least, you're helping to wake up yourself so that you can have a better understanding of the world around you and what's really going on. That's the goal. Might not have it all figured out yet, but we're a lot closer when we stay close to the people who put their life's work into documenting all those receipts so that you can look at it. And we got to continue that tradition. That is the job of the modern day citizen journalists and digital soldiers and freedom fighters and truth warriors. That is the job, to make it easier for our kids, to make sure there's a whole archive of history documented up to our point, and we can go, all right, kids, we're passing it on to you to continue to fight this evil tyranny. this force of evil in our world that wants to enslave us all to its will. That power dynamic, right? It can be defeated. It's a small group against many. It's just that it's smarter. So take a few chapters out of that book. Take a few chapters out of the book of your enemy. Put it into practice. Now it's not an easy battlefield anymore for them. Now it's much harder. And the more light gets shone on this darkness, the more exposures that can happen in all these areas, the more that justice is going to come for these people that are perpetrating this agenda. The more that the truth can be known, and the more that we can achieve the freedom that we all want and desire, and the prosperity that we all want for our countries, for our people, for our children, for our future. It's possible. It's just that we've got this going on. We're dealing with a very powerful enemy. And I'll finish with this statement. Michael Tsarian, once again, an absolute gem of a statement when he said, it's similar to I think a Sun Tzu quote, or one of the quotes where it's saying, you know a lot about yourself if you have powerful enemies. And he's like, only the powerful have powerful enemies. If the West has such a powerful enemy that has been successful up to this point of capturing our ship, it says something about the power that we possess. Only the powerful have powerful enemies. And never forget that. Truth is going to win, guys. I hope you liked it. Share it out if it resonated. I'll do more in the future.